This is one of the greatest miracles of my life. My mother's all the time, there's something's in her heart. It was against religion. It was against faith. It was against religious people. And it didn't really change. Even after 15 years, if I was praying, she was walking through, she would go like that. But she became sick. It was cancer. She had cancer. And this was just coincidence. It was pure coincidence. I went to visit her at the hospital and it was just me and her when the doctor came with the bad news. He came, he took her hand and he said, I've got some bad news, like that. And she just looked at him, she just said, how long? And he said, it's difficult to say. And I'm sitting there. He said, I think we're talking weeks rather than months. This was so shocking. I can't say to my mother, Allah will forgive you. I can't say to my mother, the next life, alhamdulillah. I can't say to my mother, Allah will reward you for your sabr. I can't say anything because she doesn't believe. What do I say? I said to her, we have a tradition in our background where we believe that we are all travelers. I said, and this life is just, we sit under a tree and we're just taking a little break. And at some point, we're all going to stand up and we're going to move on to the next part of our journey. And she looked at me and she said, I like that. And that touched her, something in her heart. Then the next thing happened, mashallah, my cousin, the same one we were very close to, he sent her an email because she was like a mother to him. And you know, at the bottom of your email, you can have a little tagline. He's happened to be at that time a quote by the poet and author, the Nobel Prize winning author, George Bernard Shaw. And my mother loved George Bernard Shaw. She was always quoting George Bernard Shaw. And at the bottom of the thing, George Bernard Shaw had said this quote about the Prophet Muhammad. He said, if anyone was able to cure the problems of this world, it would be none other than the savior of humanity, Muhammad. And my cousin just had it as a sign off at the bottom. She said, what's this? She came to me and said, did you know George Bernard Shaw said this about Muhammad? I said, yes. Now people of it, she started telling everybody, have you seen what George Bernard Shaw said about Muhammad? So slowly, you know, the door was opening. But still, I was thinking, she's not Muslim. She's not Muslim. Then she came to me and she said, I need to have a serious conversation with you. She said, look, I've told your brother and your sister that when I die, I want to be cremated. She said, that's my wish. And she said, I know you're going to find that difficult. I said, no problem. Whatever you wish is your wish. I said, but hold on. I said, but have you thought of the practicalities? What's going to happen? She said, what do you mean? She said, well, look, I said, if you die here in our home, which we hope that you'll die here in the home, I said, some strangers are going to come and take you. I said, who are these people? I said, they're just paid undertakers. They're going to come and take you. I said, then they will undress you. I said, then they will pump you full of chemicals to preserve your body. I said, then they will put makeup on your face. Then they will do your hair. Then they will put you in a dress. I said, who are these people? She said to me, she said, what's the alternative? I said, your sons will carry you and no one will see you and your dignity will be preserved at all times. I said, and you will take them to the local center. I said, your daughters will wash you. And I said, you'll be wrapped in a simple white cloth. And I said, and you'll be buried in the ground within one day. She said, that's